welcome to another episode of Not D&D. It's brought to you by EN Live, part of EN World, the leading tabletop news and reviews website. I'm Jessica, and I'm so excited because this week we have the excellent Jim Johnson here to talk to us all about Star Trek Adventures. Jim, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Jess. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me on your show tonight.
No worries. So I've seen a lot of people excited with the questions already in the comments, which is fantastic. So that's what we're here to talk about. So if you have any questions, pop them in the chat. And when we come to that point in the conversation, I'll pop them up on screen and then we'll answer the questions there for you. But before we get started, in case people live under a rock and they don't know who you are, could you give us a little intro, Jim, to who you are and what you do in the games industry?
Yeah, sure thing. My name is Jim Johnson. I have been in the RPG industry for 20 odd years. I'm a science fiction fantasy writer, and currently I am the Star Trek Adventures project manager and line editor, and that's with Modifius Entertainment.
Awesome. So that's a perfect person to answer questions about Star Trek Adventures then. We picked the right person, didn't we?
You sure did.
Awesome. So obviously, we will get into talking about Star Trek Adventures. We've got lots of fans in the comments I can already see arguing about which are the best movies. But we'll keep out of that conversation and I'll just jump into staying with RPGs. So speaking about RPGs, when did you first start role-playing? When was your first game of that?
So this is way back in the early 80s. My first RPG, my gateway, like for so many people, was the Red Box D&D, way back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And that got that from a Toys R Us, if you can believe it. I mean, this is United States.
That's
Toys R Us was a big
retro
box
reference,
store, right?
yeah.
And back when they actually sold RPG products, right, which is hard to believe, for newer fans especially. But yeah, Redbox brought it home, and my friends and I just ate it up. We loved it. We loved playing it. And from there, just expanded into a whole bunch of other games. Stayed in the TSR ecosystem for a while, with the Star Frontiers, Boot Hill, Gamma World, more in D&D, and then gradually just branched out from there as the RPG industry got bigger and more games came in, and just different opportunities to play different types of games.
That sounds awesome. That's exactly what this show is about. So we're here talking about, we love D&D and that's great, but also have you heard of? And that's exactly what this is about. So great to hear. So that's kind of transition. So obviously when you're really young playing role-playing games, that's now moved into you working in the games industry. How did you take that leap from being a player into being somebody that works in the industry?
Yeah, so I went to college, got my degree. Discovered in college that I really liked to do creative writing, and of course I'd been doing RPG writing most of my life. Once I got into the game, and I discovered that there was an easy transition between creative writing and game writing, right? Where it's I was creating stories with my friends, and it's like, oh wait, if I tweak it a little bit, I can put a story on paper and do it a little bit differently, right? And just gradually started getting involved in different games online. And early 2000s, Decipher had the license to do the Lord of the Rings RPG when the movies came out, and also had the Star Trek license. And I'm a big fan of Lord of the Rings. That's like my number 2 favorite IP or setting or whatever. And got involved in that game pretty early on as a playtest coordinator and a freelance writer, because I love the game. I started writing a bunch of stuff just as a fan, like on the side, just to spread the love and give fans more stuff to play with. And the line developer at the time said, "Hey, I like your stuff. Do you want to write for the game?" And I just started writing for the game, and just kind of went on from there. But unfortunately, Decipher kind of went under fairly soon, and so I went on to branch off to other game lines and different game companies and stuff, just to keep myself busy with the industry, and different freelance writing as well, and then fiction writing as well. So just kind of dabbled here and there over the years, and kept my finger on the pulse of who was working on what games and what games were out there and available. And then Modifius came along, and I found out that they got the Star Trek license, and submitted my vitals, and they got me involved fairly early on as a writer. And then as a freelancer, I made sure to show that I had other skills that I could put to use, and they rapidly put me to work on a whole bunch of other stuff, editing and proofreading, and just rapidly took on more responsibility from there.
Awesome. So it sounds like the perfect combination for you, because you're a Trekkie, you've been role playing like your whole life, and it's just so perfect job. So there's some people in the comments that agree with you as well, that Trek and Lord of the Rings is favorite IPs. So you're not the only person there. And I've got to say that's true as well, because I do have this sat right next to me. So
nice.
yeah. So yes. But yeah, so definitely some fans that are along with you there. So yeah, so you also was writing RPGs, so you're also a writer as well. So you am I right in saying that you wrote a Star Trek book as well?
Actually, some short stories back in
Mm-hmm.
the late '90s,
Yeah.
early 2000s. I guess the aughts, whatever you call them. Simon and Schuster, who has the license to do Star Trek novels, they decided to run a short story contest for the fans, basically, where if you were a fan and you could write a professional quality story, you could submit it, and then the editor would review all the submissions and take the best 20, 25 stories and then publish them in an anthology. And they ran that anthology for 10 solid years. And I remember the editor at the time, and this is way back when AOL was still a thing. He
Yeah.
had a little chat room on AOL, and he would say like every year consistently they were getting like 3,000 to 6,000 manuscripts, and it was a very small window of time. Right? I mean, you could only submit stories from like, I don't know, like August to October or something before for the next year, and he was getting 6,000 stories a year, and he would show pictures of his
Oh, wow.
of his post room, right, just stacked full of manuscripts all over the place from fans who were just passionate
Because it
about
would be
Star Trek.
post back then as well. It would be physical
Yeah,
mail in those
yeah.
days. Yeah. Oh
Yeah,
gosh.
no, yeah, we did. They didn't have. I mean, we weren't doing. They were doing email submissions. They wanted actual paper,
Oh
over
my
the transom,
gosh.
basically. Shows you how different the world has
Yeah,
become in like
yeah. So
even just
different now.
10, 15 years or whatever, right? It's crazy.
Mm.
But yeah, so I got in 3 successive years, I got a story published into 3 different anthologies for Star
Mm-hmm.
Trek, and then kind of got my foot in the door a little bit with Simon and Schuster, and got invited to do a novella for another Star Trek anthology. And right about that time, I was really working with a couple of the editors trying to get some novel pitches, through and approved. And unfortunately, at the time, that was like right about the time Enterprise went off the air,
Oh, okay.
prematurely, and then they didn't have another
Mm-hmm.
series coming up, and so it was like that little kind of like that
Yeah.
weird little window of time where Star Trek was kind of on the decline, and Simon and Schuster went from 2 paperback releases a month to 1 release a month because they saw that there was a diminishing returns, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so the opportunities for newer writers disappeared pretty much,
Oh no.
and just the missed opportunity there for me and for a bunch of my friends who had also done Strange New World stories. But just kept plugging away and doing different stories for different anthologies and doing some self-publishing and keeping myself busy with the writing.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it was a great experience though, and the having done the anthologies and the Star Trek anthologies gave me the opportunity to go to a lot of conventions as a Star Trek writer. And at those conventions, I got to meet
Yeah.
the fans, of course, which is great to meet the fans.
Mm-hmm.
But I also had an opportunity to meet some of my peers and some of my fellow Star Trek writers, and I built up friendships and professional relationships with a lot of them. And I was
Mm-hmm.
able to pull all of that into Modifius when I got into this job because I was able to bring on Dayton Ward and Scott Pearson and some of the other writers who I
Yeah.
knew just as friends at these conventions,
Mm-hmm.
and just I said, hey, I'm getting involved with the Star Trek RPG with Modifius. Do you want to play? Do you want to come into the sandbox and play with me? I can get
And
you
they
in.
were like, yes, yes, we
And
do.
yeah, and so Modifius was like, oh my gosh, yes, please, because this is going to give us instant cachet
Yeah.
with our CBS approvers, the
Mm-hmm.
approvals team, right? Because the CBS approvals team, or Paramount now,
Mm-hmm.
they approve everything, right? So
Yeah.
they already knew Dayton, and they already knew Scott, and they already knew some of the other names. It's like, oh,
Mm.
it just made it so much easier for us to say, well, we've got these people on board writing some of this stuff, and CBS approves everything that we do. But it just helped a lot that I was able to bring those connections along with me, and it provided a huge lift right from the beginning.
Yeah, that is awesome. And we have some people. Oh, a wrong comment I put in here. There are loads of people that are reading the novels here. So we've got
Yeah,
Leprechaun here who read so many of those novels back in the day. So we have some fans of that there.
and there's so
Um,
many novels too. There's so many. There's hundreds of them, and you just dive
yeah,
right in and have fun.
it's a massive universe as well.
Hmm.
So jumping into that universe, so I mentioned about when did you get started with RPGs, but because this is such a Star Trek is such a big IP license world genre. I don't know the institution. it's such a big thing. When did you get started with that? Like, what was your first kind of Star Trek memory?
Man, way back. I mean, I can remember I was a little boy in New York City, and I had a little 3-inch black and white portable TV, right, with the old
Wow.
aerial that you have to pull, and you had to aim the aerial to try to hope
Okay.
you could pick up the signal. And
Yeah.
sometimes I'd put tinfoil on it. It was classic tinfoil on the aerial. But if my friends and I, if we were on the playground, and if we aimed that aerial just right, we could pick up a rerun of Star
Mm.
Trek, the original Star Trek series on the black and white TV, and we'd watch it for a little while, and we'd watch, Kirk and Spock and Scotty and everybody doing their thing on the ship, and then we'd run out to the playground, and we'd be the Starfleet crew,
Yeah, of course.
going after Klingons or Romulans or whatever. And so from the very beginning, I was into Star Trek. 6, 7 years old, and I think the first novel I read for Star Trek was one of the old photo novels, where they would take still shots of the show, and they would
Oh
put
yeah.
put little captions in it, almost like a comic book, but
Yeah.
with pictures, right? And it was just classic stuff. And so I really grew up with Star Trek even before Star Wars came out. So I
Yeah.
like that generation of Star Trek, Star Wars fans. That's
Yeah.
totally me.
That's so awesome. I have some brilliant questions that are coming in already, so I'm just trying to I'm trying to get them to come down in that. So you've been a fan always of
Yeah,
it. So oh gosh, I'm getting so many questions. Sorry, I'm being absolutely
that's okay.
flooded with questions. So I'm going to move on to talk a specific Star Trek questions that's not related to the RPG, because this question is, and it's, what are the best 3 Star Trek movies? Because there's been an argument in the comments, and I'm dragging you into it now, John.
Of course, this is all it's all opinion, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there is no way to judge which one's the best or not the best. But so I'm gonna sidestep this and dodge it a little bit and say, instead of saying what are the best ones, I'm gonna say what are my favorites, right?
That's brilliant. I love that.
I
Yeah.
think I think the motion picture has got to be on the top of the list, because without the motion picture, we wouldn't have anything after it. I think that even though
Yeah.
Star Wars influenced it, having just watched the remaster on Paramount Plus, I was just blown away all over again. I mean, there's parts of it that are very languid and deliberate, but like at its heart, it's such a great story.
Yeah.
And I love motion picture more than it probably more than I probably should. But so yeah, motion picture, and then Star Trek 2, Wrath of Khan, of course, is great because there's so many great character moments in it, and there's so much pathos. And with the Kirk and Spock, and that whole closing scene, it was just set up so well. I think Nicholas Meyer did an amazing job with that film. And then number 3, that's a tough one, because but it's hard to look at
What
Star
do you
Trek.
pick?
It's hard to look at Star Trek 2 without the trilogy, right? Because 3 and 4 all kind of make one nice package. There, Star Trek 6 has its moments. I think I guess if I had to pick one more to go after motion picture and Wrath of Khan, it'd probably be First Contact. Just because I think John Frakes did a great job directing that, and there's just so much great performances in that movie, and great music too. Yeah, I think First Contact would probably be my favorite of the next gen era movies. And I like First Contact more than I like most of the other original series movies. But I mean, it's like, I don't want to say it's like picking your children, right? Because, but I mean, I've been with these movies for so long now. I mean, all my life, and it's hard to say which one I like better. But if I had to go with my favorite
Your
3, it'd be
favorites.
motion
Yeah.
picture, Wrath of Khan, and then First Contact.
And some people in the comments are saying that other things are different from their favorites, and that's okay. We can all have different favorite
Yeah.
things. We all like Star Trek here, so we're all friends.
Yeah.
Remember
And,
that. Remember that in the comments, everyone.
yeah, and that really harkens, Jess, to what you were saying a few minutes ago about how Star Trek is almost an institution now, right?
Yes.
It's 54, 55 years old now. It's been around for so long. There are so many episodes, so many movies, so many comic books, so many novels. So Star Trek means different things to so many different people.
Yeah.
That you just find what you like. And the great thing is, like, if a new series comes out or a new episode comes out and you just don't like it, that's okay, because there's another 1,000 episodes that you can go watch and pick the ones that you like, right? So, like, I know a lot of fans are vocal about not liking Discovery or not liking Lower Decks or not liking Picard or whatever. It's like, that's okay. You're not required to like all Star Trek, because there's 1,000 hours of it. So go find the episodes that you do love, and you watch those again. It's okay. I mean, there's something for everybody, I think, in Star Trek.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's such a, yeah, like you say, it's such a big world, and there's so much material to get through. So I do want to dig into kind of what you do, because it's quite funny. You were saying when you're younger, you were like, when you were like 6, 7 years old, you were going out playing pretend with your friends, and now your job is facilitating people playing pretend that they're in Star
Yeah,
Trek.
yeah.
So that's literally what your job is now.
Mhm.
So I think so many people love this world because they get to be. So I kind of mentioned before, role-playing games, when people come to them, sometimes it's the theme or the world that kind of really draws them in. So I think some people might have never tried a role-playing game, but because it's Star Trek, they'll be like, yeah, this is what I want to try, because this is the world I want to be in and kind of walk about in. So you get to be a crew member, and there's a whole range of eras. And I do have a question for somebody that, Jim, if you could be a crew member in any era, which would you choose to be?
That's like a double question. It's like what crew member would I be and what era do I want to be in, right?
Well, let's
uh,
take the era first. Let's take the,
yeah.
yeah. Let's take that one at a time.
Oh gosh, this is such a great question because like the original series is so much fun, and
Yeah.
like the Enterprise era is so much fun, and of course Next Gen,
Hmm.
DS9, and everything else. Just given what we know about what happens
Hmm.
in the later eras, I'd probably want to be a crew member in the original series, like on a Constitution class ship, like Kirk or Spock or whatever,
Uh-huh.
on that kind of a ship, because everything's new. Like you're stretching the boundaries of of the known universe. You're out there doing science and exploration and discovery, and you have an opportunity to butt heads with the Klingons and other weird and strange
Yeah.
alien species, and everything is new and different. I think, certainly original series, maybe without the misogyny and the sexism of the period, right? But that's the '60s, and you can't really
Yeah, yeah.
look
Well,
at
I
that.
think even, I mean, it's obviously there, but I think even for it, it was working well for the time that it was in.
Mhm.
Because
Yeah,
I think that the fact that all the crew members weren't just a bunch of white men, which
right.
but in itself was a huge step forward at the time and caused
Hmm.
controversy at the time. I remember, but
Yeah,
yeah. But
absolutely.
it's a great series for that. And I remember when I first watched it when I was quite young, and my dad was watching it on TV, and I walked past, and I'd seen some sci-fi stuff and things, and a lot of the stuff I'd seen had male protagonists in, and the women were there being very pretty and just kind of going, "What do we do, Captain?"
Hmm.
And that what I really liked about Star Trek is the women in this were officers, and they were important, and they were making decisions,
Yeah.
and she was even the captain when I'd seen it. So that's one of the things when you're saying Star Trek means different things to different people. I think that diversity and representation it has, and that's part of Starfleet, as well. I think that's so important as well. And I think is that something you've tried to get into the game as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. From the very beginning, we knew we wanted this to be a really diverse game. Not just like in the artwork. Like if you look at the artwork,
Hmm.
you'll see a wide spectrum of humanoids and aliens and skin tones and genders and all that. All that we tried to do that. And in fact, my AD, my art director, and I were just talking the other day that we need to continue to keep ramping it up and keep diversifying and keep showing all the different possibilities of not just humanity but all the different aliens too, right? Like
Yeah.
certainly Klingons and Vulcans and Andorians, etc. They're not monoliths, right? They've all got their own unique species
Hmm.
and sub races and whatnot, and we need to be able to present those just as diversely as we do humanity. So we do that in the artwork, but also in like my development team and my writing team, I try really hard to make sure that it's not just a bunch of writers who look like me, right?
Yeah.
Middle aged white guys. So I am extraordinarily grateful that a lot of people
Hmm.
have been willing to come on board with me to do this game, and they know. I'm pretty confident they know. If they don't, I'll keep telling them. But
Yeah.
I try very hard to be a champion for all my LGBTQIA queer family and
Hmm.
friends, and just everybody that I can possibly get involved in the game I do. And I'm really excited because we just announced the Discovery campaign book last week coming out,
Yes.
and that is the most diverse group of writers that I've had on any book so far. And I cannot wait for it to get out to people so they can see it and enjoy it, because it's got a whole bunch of great voices in it for writing, and I can't wait for people to see it, and I can't wait to see who it inspires to reach out to me so that you can work on the game line too, because I'm always looking for more writers, and I'll take literally anybody. I'm willing to give anybody a try who loves Star Trek. So hopefully we'll see what comes of that.
Yeah, definitely. So it's great to see that that's running through in the books and the games. As well, you briefly mentioned Star Trek Adventures, the Discovery Campaign Guide. I'm going to put a link in the comments because we did a little article about that on EM World when you launched it, and I was very excited. And I said, "Wait, I'm going to speak to Jim about it when we get there." But I feel like I'm jumping a little bit ahead of myself. So if people are new to Star Trek Adventures and they're just hearing about it now, so can you talk us through what eras there are, what's currently out there? And we know that Discovery's coming, but what have we got so far? Because somebody said that their favorite era is, the movies you're talking about, like Khan and things like that. Are those eras available out now, or what have we got?
Yeah, so from the very beginning, when the game came out in 2017, we made a conscious decision to kind of go with 2371 as the default year, and that's early next gen DS9 era, because there was just so much stuff going on in canon, right? You had the Dominion War starting to heat up. Voyager just disappeared, right? Voyager went into the Badlands and got whisked off to the Delta Quadrant. There's just a lot of stuff going on in the Alpha and Beta quadrants. We were like, this is a good place to set it up. And like our kind of our tagline at the time was, Starfleet needs a new crew, right? Because the Enterprise had just been destroyed in Star Trek Generations, right? And so the Enterprise was gone. Voyager's gone. The war's getting ready to heat up in DS9, and so it seemed like a good place to say, hey, if you want to be a new Starfleet crew, there's plenty of stuff to do. Jump in and let's go. And even though we kind of focused on that as kind of like the default setting, the game system and the game rules support all Star Trek. So if you want to play in Enterprise, or you want to play in the original series, or you want to play in the Lost era kind of like movie period, or DS9 or Next Gen or Voyager, or even beyond that, I mean, at this point, now that we have Lower Decks and Picard, and even Discovery, now that Discovery's out into the 32nd century, like it's all Star Trek, right? The rules don't change from era to era, from genre to genre. You don't need an original series core rule book, or a next gen core rule book, or a Voyager core rule book to play the game. We have one core book. I mean, technically we have two, because we got the Klingon book out, and I'm sure we'll talk about that shortly. But yeah, this core book right here, this is all you need to play. Honestly, this will cover literally everything. And what I try to encourage folks, especially newer folks to the game, is that even though it has the next gen kind of DS9 Voyager aesthetic, especially because we use the LCARS design layout on the interior, just because at the time we thought that was the right choice. The game really is truly for all eras of Star Trek. We try to be very clear that in the game, at least, that whether you're on a Kirk style Constitution ship, or the NX style ship with Archer in Enterprise, or you're on a cutting edge ship with Picard right at the end of Nemesis. There, it all fits. It's all Star Trek. It's all good here. So really, any era of play is available to you.
That's awesome to know. I have a few other pictures here as well, so I'll just get you to chat us through what we're seeing here.
Yeah, so this is a fairly new release for us. This is the original series tricorder collector's edition set. And this has been a long time in the making. We actually started developing this product like right after the core book came out in 2017. So like 2017, early 2018 is when we started developing this, because when the game launched, we did a big splashy like board cube kind of thing, where the board cube was packed full of miniatures and tokens and the core rule book, and a GM screen that slotted right into it. So it looked like a complete thing. And that was like really our love letter to Star Trek, but especially for Star Trek Next Gen fans. And we knew we wanted to do something special for the original series fans. And so we thought about it. We were like, well, let's do a box that looks like the original series, Spock tricorder, with the flip lid and all that stuff, and just pack it full of, useful game stuff. And so what this is it's the core rule book that you showed before, but it's cut down to a digest size paperback. And it's also we took out about 60 pages of content and focused it entirely on the original series. So where the main core rule book covers all eras of play, we did a top-down revision of it and focused it entirely on the original series, just changing all the example text from like Next Gen to original series, or Voyager to original series, and stripping out some of the Next Gen like species and historical elements, that kind of stuff. We just took all that out. So if you're an hardcore original series fan, and that's all you want in your game, right, this is probably the product for you, because it's really truly Star Trek, original series. We threw in some dice. We made some special dice for this set. It's like Kirk's green and gold tunic that he wore in a lot of episodes. So instead of our traditional like division colored dice that are red, gold, and blue, we went with his green tunic for these. There's also a 3-part campaign and a whole bunch of reference cards and the Enterprise crew, and then we also did some pre-generated characters for the Lexington. So there's some flexibility here in terms of what characters you want to play. But the digest has all the rules as well, so you could make your own characters just like you could in the rule book.
Sure. So that's chock-a-block for the goodies there.
Yeah.
We've had an excellent question, which is about how much, because this is a license, like you say, so how much leeway do you have with a license to create your own materials and things like that?
That's a great question. Yeah, we have quite a bit of leeway in terms of like what we want to, what we can create, and we have at this point, we're 5 years into it now. We have a wonderful relationship with CBS with our review team. I mean, they review literally everything we do. But they are very open to us being creative and doing different things. In fact, the Shackleton Expanse campaign guide that we came out with late last year, that's a full-blown campaign setting set in a part of the Beta Quadrant that is pretty much untouched by literally any other licensee by Star Trek. Like we just created it pretty much whole cloth. And they were like, okay, this is great. It's not canon, so have fun. It's official, even though it's not canon. Right, and there's a distinction there, but we're pretty much free to make up what we want. That being said, though, like myself and my writers are super respectful of the license. And I mean, we all love Star Trek to the core, hardcore, really, really, truly do. And our reviewers know that, and our reviewers love Star Trek. And so we're not going to go off the rails and make some random weird
history,
history or contribution. And like go on a lengthy here's the 30-page dissertation on the history of the Pakleds, and they're not going to sign off on it because of course the Pakleds right now are a big deal in lower decks, so who knows what they're going to do with it there. But we try to be very, very respectful of the property. We try to adhere fairly closely to canon, but we also try to provide a lot of plot hooks and elements and suggestions so that a fan who's kind of familiar with Star Trek, but may not be familiar with like all the other stuff, all the novels and comic books and everything else, can still read the game and be like, okay, I remember that, I get that, and we're not throwing stuff at them that's just like completely, arcane or hard to like. We dropped in a lot of Easter eggs, right? Because fortunately, Scott Pearson happens to be our canon editor. But he's also the primary copy editor for Simon & Schuster, right? So for the Star Trek books. So he's read like all the Star Trek books, the novels, multiple times. And so if I go to him and I say, hey, I need an Easter egg for something that happened in the Beta Quadrant in this time frame, he can go through the novels and he can find a little nugget that we can just drop into the book. The CBS approvers will approve it, and the fans who are paying attention, or the fans who like really know the novels and stuff, will read it and they'll go, "Oh, hey, I remember that." But then your casual fans aren't going to care; they'll just gloss by it and say that's new and fresh. So we do try to create our own stuff as well as stick to canon. But I think previous owners of the Star Trek RPG license were very creative. And I think in some cases that might have been to their detriment because they went so far off the expectations that it's hard to come back to it. So we try to adhere pretty close to canon, but we don't really have any restrictions about what we can or can't use for the most part. We don't try to sneak anything past CBS because they'll figure it out anyway. But we have too much respect for them anyway to try to do that. So hopefully folks are digging what we are coming up with.
It sounds like it from in the comments. That does lead me on though, because it's really clear that this system's been made with a lot of love and for fans, but in a way that could be a bit intimidating for somebody who's a bit more, or somebody that's maybe enjoys the game a bit more casually or something. Because I know some people might be like, well, I don't know all the lore and I don't know the whole setting of everything. How could I possibly run a game of it? Is the game accessible for people that don't know everything about Star Trek?
Well, I want to believe it is accessible. Like the game itself, I think it's accessible. I think with 5 years of hindsight, being able to look back, I think we maybe could have done a better job on the core rule book in terms of like the way we presented the order in which we presented the content. I think if you look at it, there's an early chapter that is just nothing but sidebars and fictional vignettes of all kinds of different things pulled in from canon history, right?
Yeah.
And I think hardcore fans like me and other hardcore fans would be
Mhm.
reading those and they're like, oh, we get it because we know where all the references are coming from.
Yeah.
But I think somebody new to Star Trek would read that, and I think it would be a little bit impenetrable because if you don't know the references, then you're just kind of like reading all these stories, and you're like, oh, okay, what's that from? I don't know. And then you get intimidated because there's just so much stuff to keep track of. But I do, in 5 years, I've realized that there's a whole new generation of Star Trek fans coming into Star Trek by virtue of the new shows that are on, which
Yeah.
is super, super exciting. But the challenge there is that they do get intimidated. They look at the 55
Yeah.
years of history. They see 1,000 episodes and 13 movies and thousands of novels and comic books and soundtracks and just there's so much Star Trek out there.
Exactly. Yeah.
They're like, and I can hear it. Like I see it on social media all the time for this game. They're like, I want to run Star Trek, but like I'm afraid to because there's just so much Star Trek. And
Exactly.
if somebody at my game table knows Star Trek better than I do, the game session is going to be nothing but them nitpicking me to say, oh, you get no, but it's this, but it's this, but it's this, or oh, this reference says this, or this reference says that, or in this episode, blah blah blah, and that's hard to overcome, right? And as a game, that's hard to overcome too sometimes. And so, what I try to encourage people to do is, especially with lower decks, right, just grab the episodes that you enjoy, have a really good session 0 with your game group, and say, here's Star Trek. Here's our vision for Star Trek for the purposes of this game, and
Yeah.
then just run with it and have fun,
Yeah.
and just go do whatever you want to do with it for Star Trek. Because like I said earlier, there's so much Star Trek right now, and there's something for everybody. So really have that session 0 with your group and figure out like what does Star Trek mean to your group, and then play that.
Yeah.
Don't worry about everything else. Just focus on what you guys enjoy collectively.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I think that's almost true for any kind of setting where there's a lot of
Yeah.
lore and history. I mean, at the end of the day, you're coming together with your friends or a group of people to kind of play the game and have fun and enjoy it. And so, maybe that's not what it's like 100% in, episode 2 or something, but that's what we're doing here today. And I think, yeah, that's definitely the right attitude to take. I have a question going back to official and canon. So they've said, what's the most bizarre thing you've created that's official, even if not canon?
Gosh, there's so much stuff I have to remember now. I think the in the Shackleton book that we just came out with, which features a full-blown campaign setting, but also a 10-part campaign. In that, I made sure that the writers created all new alien species that we could populate this new section of space and give players an opportunity to play an alien species that you haven't seen before, right? So it's not just Klingons and Romulans and Andorians or whatever. We created 4 entirely new species for the book, all of which could be Starfleet officers at some point, or could be like interesting, not supporting, but interesting main characters of their own right, kind of like an Odo or a Neelix or a Kess or Akira. Like you especially in the more recent series, you have an alien who's not part of Starfleet, but is still a main character on the show, right? Providing that interesting alternative perspective. And so we created some really wild aliens in that. Like there's a living crystal, basically called the Calmirans. It's not something you would probably have seen on a show, but I think like Lower Decks could probably do it, or Prodigy even, because it would really fit that animation style, right? Because it's basically a living crystal, right? Like a living crystal floating along the hallway. We have a centaur-like character that's part I can't remember the alien, the animal though, but there's some great artwork in the book about them. But so we created some very different species for the Shackleton book. I think in answer to the question, those are probably the most bizarre things, but I want to say bizarre in like a positive sense as opposed to bizarre in like a weird, creepy kind of sense.
Yeah. No, definitely. So creative, unique, maybe that sort of thing for sure. So we talked a lot about the setting, Star Trek. We love Star Trek. we get that. Someone's had an excellent question. So this show is not D&D, so we're kind of comparing it to how it's different from D&D. So they've asked how mechanically is the game different from D&D? What's the system that you get with Star Trek Adventures?
Yeah, this is almost a loaded question. So the 2D20 system is Modiphius's house RPG system that they've used and adapted for a lot of games, including Conan, Infinity, Star Trek, Dune, and a couple others that I'm probably not remembering. John Carter Mars, and a couple others. And what Nathan Dowdell has done, he's the main systems designer at Modiphius, is he's taken the base 2D20 system and he adapts it for every intellectual property that we do for the game, right? And it's amazing to me how flexible the system is, because you can do so many different things with it and have it feel like so many different things. Like Conan feels very Conan, Star Trek feels very Star Trek, Dune feels very Dune, and there's similarities among the three, or among the seven, or however many there are now, but they're all very uniquely different too. So that's the cool thing about the 2D20 system, in my opinion. How is it different from D&D? It's almost 180 degrees, honestly. And it's not just because you're rolling 2D20 and you're rolling under a target number. Like you want ones in like ones in 2D20 are like 20s in D20, right? So it's completely reversed from what your expectations are. If you're a hardcore D&D player and you're coming into Star Trek Adventures, there will be a learning curve, right? Because you have to get over that. You have to get over that. Oh, I just rolled a 20. This is awesome. It's like, well, no. In Star Trek, rolling a 20 creates some. I mean, it's still awesome, right? You don't fail. It creates a complication, and what that complication does is it makes the drama more interesting. It makes the scene that you're in more interesting.
Yes, yeah.
And so I'd say if I had to compare the two, like as much as I love D&D, in my opinion, only my opinion, and I'm sure I'll get some hate mail for this. Like D&D is a very, very good combat simulator that has RPG kind of built on top of it.
You've been chatting to Andrew Peregrine about this. He said the same thing.
Oh, that's funny. Interesting. Well, I've talked to my game group about this over the years, because like we've been playing D&D for 30 odd years, and we've been playing Star Trek games for 30 odd years, whether it's FASA or Decipher or Glass Unicorn Games or this one, or even our own home brews, right? Because for a long time there wasn't a Star Trek game out that really fit the way we like to do Star Trek. So we just kind of made up our own stuff, right? We just made up our own rules and our own game and made it work. But D&D for us, only from my game experience. I'm not going to talk about it as a thing, right? But just the way we play D&D is it's very much okay. We're in combat mode now. We're doing the dice. We're doing the miniatures. We're doing the combat. And then once that combat's over, we switch into the role playing side of things, and it's like we don't even need the rules system, right? Like that whole part of it goes away. And it's like that weird dichotomy of like, wait a minute, this is a why is the RP just like completely mechanics free, and yet we get into the combat and it's like that's all that you're at the table, you're doing the mechanics, you're doing the miniatures and stuff. So it's just interesting how different it is. But when we play Star Trek, though, Star Trek is like literally it's all theater of the mind. Like there are whole sessions where we go where we don't even roll the dice, because we're just getting into the drama of interpersonal relationships and characters going back and forth and doing the drama and doing the scenes and problem solving and negotiating and getting to the diplomacy and all this stuff. It's just a very different feel. At its heart, the 2D20 Star Trek system has a very simple mechanic, right? It's 2D20. You create a target number, you roll under it, and you count up how many successes you get, and or complications, and then things can impact it. There are some meta currencies involved that you can use, but like if you get the basic mechanic down, basic task resolution down, you can run session after session with very minimal dice rolling and still have an amazing time with your game group, either live or virtually. Like this game's really picked up because the virtual experience really lends itself to it, I think. I may have gotten off the track a little bit here, but no, so
no, that's fine.
I do know, having heard from a lot of folks on social media, there is a learning curve between coming from D&D coming into this game, and it's just a matter of like letting go of everything about D&D and just being open to trying a new game that provides a very different experience. And I think one of the other things that's really different about Star Trek compared to D&D, and we'll be specific about D&D because that's what we're talking about here, right?
Yeah.
Is that Star Trek, like you don't play Star Trek to level up your character, right? There's no levels, there is some character progression, but like if you watch the shows or you watch the movies, like
Mhm.
the characters are at the peak of their capability, right? We're
Yeah.
300 years in the future. People don't have to work, right? They are doing this because they love it, because they want to be out there exploring, discovering,
Mhm.
bettering themselves. And so when you start, like, I mean, even Ensign Kim is an amazing, highly competent character, right? And so even
Mhm.
if you're playing an ensign or a veteran captain, you are at the very peak of your abilities and talents and skills.
Mhm.
And especially if you play a captain, right? If you're playing a captain player
Yeah.
character, like, what are you going to do? You could become an admiral, sure, but like as far as, like, leveling up or progressions, like there's not really a thing to do, and it's just like you're really in it more for the story and for the collaborative storytelling experience, as opposed to, like, gaining a new magic item or leveling up and getting a new feat or something. Like I said, there is some progression, but I think the gamers who are really into gaming for the sake of leveling up and improving their
Mhm.
characters' abilities and getting the new magic items. And but I think you're going to miss out on something with Star Trek, only because
Mhm.
it's just a very different, um,
It's a different story,
a
isn't
different
it?
mindset and a different kind of
Yeah.
storytelling. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you've kind of leaning into answering a question I've got here, which is so in the living campaign, you created lots of different like moral situations.
Hmm.
And was that the person here's asked, was that an active decision you took when you wrote them? And it sounds like, yeah, that's what you want it to be. You want it to be more about the drama and the narrative opposed to, like you say, leveling
Hmm.
up and
Yeah,
winning.
absolutely, absolutely. I mean, if you've watched the TV show, like the vast majority of Star Trek episodes are are the characters getting into some sort of moral situation, right, or some sort of interpersonal conflict that they have to resolve. And sometimes
Mhm.
it's like, here's two horrible decisions. Which one do you pick? Knowing that they both suck, right? Like do you pick the worst situation or the not quite as worst situation? And like for a game
Yeah.
master, those are great to throw at your players, because, like, there's not necessarily a right answer and there's not necessarily a wrong answer. It's just like, how do your characters deal with it? And in Star Trek, all the characters have values, right? What are important to your characters? Like, maybe they're Starfleet to the core, or
Yeah.
the crew is my family, or I'll never walk away from a fight. These are all things that are very important to them. And a good GM and a good group of players will get into situations where those values are challenged, or
Yeah.
they'll say, "Oh, here's something that's happening. I'm going to lean into my value of, I'll never walk away from a fight," and that can have an impact on the gameplay, and that can have an impact on the character, because the characters will change those values over time, reflecting how they're changing as people because of the events that they're put into and the choices that they make, right? And so, yeah, absolutely. Every time we publish a standalone adventure or a mission pack, or we do some sort of you know thing that we're presenting story to you, there's always going to be some sort of moral situation, because that's what we see on the TV show, right?
Yeah.
And that's good. I mean, that's just good drama.
Mhm.
That's good storytelling. I mean, it would be kind of boring to have people just like hanging out on the holodeck doing nothing. Like, you got to have
What a
something.
lovely day.
Yeah, you got to have something for them to get involved with. And
Mhm.
I think moral situations are part and parcel of the Star Trek drama from the 60s on to now. And so, absolutely, that was a conscious decision to keep that alive.
So as well as the core rule books, you do have all these other kind of adventure books and
Mhm.
things like that you mentioned as well. Which ones of those are kind of your favorite ones, or what ones would you recommend to people that were just starting out with the system?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, for fans coming new to the game, I mean, without sounding like I'm patting myself on the back, because I'm not, but like, this is a very mature game line, right? We're 5 years into it.
Yes.
I am fortunate that Modifius has been willing to be very supportive of all the crazy ideas I come up with, and this game is extraordinarily well supported in
Mhm.
terms of, like, just product and stuff that's out there.
Yeah.
Um, and so, like, we have several paths of entry into the game. So, like, we've got two free quick starts in PDF. You got a regular Starfleet version, and then we have a
Mhm.
Klingon quick start, because we do have a whole subline of Klingon products available now.
Oh, yes.
And
I'll
so, if you
put that
want to,
up here.
yeah, there you go. So that's the Klingon core book that we came out with a couple years
Mhm.
ago. And there's a little story behind that, but I'll say that for a second here. Let me.
Okay,
So
yeah.
we got two quick starts, right? We got the Starfleet quick start and the Klingon quick start, both of which are free, free downloads, and they have pre-generated characters and a short adventure and all the rules that you need to play it, right? I mean, there's no character generation There's no starship combat in the two quick starts, but it's enough to get you into the game and to get you playing and to have a good time with your friends at the table. And then from there, you can launch into whatever core book you want, whether it's the Starfleet core rule book, the Klingon core rule book, or now we also have the tricorder collector set, which provides it's a full rule set, but provides a different aesthetic, right? Because it's the original series as opposed to the next generation.
Yeah.
There's also a starter set, a boxed starter set, which was really designed for people new to the game, because the 3-part campaign in the starter set was written specifically to teach you the game as you play, right? And it includes maps and tokens and dice and all the stuff you would expect from a starter set. So you get the quick starts, the starter set. I mean, there's just so many ways to get into the game now, right?
Yeah.
But then from there, we just have a lot of supplements that are truly supplements. Like, they're nice to have, but they're not required. I mean, really, unlike, this is no disparagement against D&D. This is just their business model, where you need those 3 classic books, right? You need the player guide, the game master guide, and the monster manual.
Yeah.
For Star Trek, all you really need is one of the core books, and you can.
And you're good to go.
That's all you need. But we've got division source books that go into more detail on the different Starfleet divisions, command, sciences, and operations. We have a quadrant book for each of the 4 quadrants, so Alpha, Beta, Gamma, Delta. We have 2 adventure compendiums that have adventures in them. So we got These Are the Voyages has 8 adventures. Strange New Worlds has 9. The Shackleton Expanse, which you're showing now, Shackleton Expanse Campaign Guide, is a massive campaign that spans from the original series into the next gen era. 10-part, very large campaign. Plus a whole bunch of additional. I mean, this is a 300-page book, so it's almost as big as the core book.
Oh wow!
Just a wealth of material on a specific section of the Beta Quadrant. A lot of NPCs, ships, the new species, etc. And so, like, if you were coming in new to the game, if you grabbed the core rule book of your choice and the Shackleton book, like that's years of gaming right there. And for those of you who are familiar, because we're talking not D&D. If you're familiar with Pendragon. The Great Pendragon campaign, that big, massive book that Greg Stafford created for Pendragon, that was my inspiration for doing the Shackleton book. Just to provide a wealth of material for players and game masters and just drop it on them and say, here's so much stuff that we could throw at you. Have fun with it. Go do what you want with it and make it your own. Hopefully fans will dig it and really enjoy it. And one of the things I like about the Shackleton book, again, like I said earlier, is that a lot of the content is original. So if you're a big Star Trek fan, and you've been following the franchise for years, you're still going to find something new in here, because so much of this nobody else has touched yet. Like, none of the other licensees have really looked at this yet, or maybe not even know about it. We've talked to a couple people. We've talked to a couple people, but we just haven't been able to make anything happen yet. But like, if you need a campaign setting, Shackleton Expanse will give that to you. And we were very careful to write it in such a way that if you're not, like, if you're playing an Enterprise era game or a far future Discovery game, or like whatever you want, you can take the Shackleton Expanse and pretty much just like pick it up out of the original series next gen era and just port it to wherever you want to. You can change it pretty easily. If you're playing a Klingon campaign, like using the Klingon core rulebook, you can play the Shackleton Expanse entirely as Klingons if you want.
Oh, amazing!
Because we were careful to build that into the living campaign and then evolved it into the Shackleton Expanse. So players. I didn't even talk about all the digital stuff we have available too. We have a bunch of digital PDF standalone adventures and also mission packs that are available. The mission packs are free for game masters. That provides high-level outlines for adventures and episodes, mission ideas. And I think the last time I counted, I think we've got probably 150 like discrete episodes or missions that players and game masters can use. So there's just a wealth of material out there right now for Star Trek, and there's more coming. Like, I've got my development schedule set for the next 2 years, and there's just
so you're busy.
so much new stuff coming, and I'm just so excited that to get it out there.
Yeah, well, looking forward to hear a lot about that. I've put up on the screen for everyone, and if you're listening on the podcast, it's modiphius.net, where you can check out everything that we just talked about there, so you can find it all in there. And on social media, it's at Modiphius. So if you want to check out anything there, that's the place, the one-stop shop for that. Coming back into the game a little bit, you briefly mentioned the value system. Could you talk about that a little bit more? For we have someone here saying they love the value system, but for those of us that aren't familiar with it, could you just give us a little overview of it?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you create a character, you go through. Ideally, you would go through a life path creation system where you kind of go step by step through your character's life and career, and
Okay.
at certain points in that life path, the game will prompt you to say, okay, come up with a value related to your academy experience or your Starfleet career or your childhood. Like
Mhm.
what important thing did you pick up in your childhood? Maybe
Yeah.
you grew up on a remote colony somewhere and
Mhm.
you knew that the only thing that mattered was your friends. Like, the most
Yeah.
important thing are my friends because maybe you were remote and that's all you had. And so you create these four values, and as you play through the game, hopefully the game master is presenting you with dramatic situations that will give you an opportunity to either call upon one of those values or to challenge it. Like maybe one of your values is I'm Starfleet to the core. Well, what happens when you're presented with a
Mhm.
situation where somebody in Starfleet is doing something kind of hinky and
Yeah.
maybe is putting a giving you a opportunity to see that maybe not everything in Starfleet is quite so rosy. How does that
Mhm.
impact your values to where you've had your entire life believing that Starfleet was the pinnacle and like you are Starfleet
Yeah.
to the core, but now you're being, like, you're questioning that.
Challenged. Yeah.
You're being challenged, and so like you can
Mhm.
call upon that, and that gives you a small
Mhm.
mechanical benefit in the moment of the game, and then you cross it off, and then you have to rewrite that value to reflect what happened in the game, right? So whatever experience you just had, how did that how did that change your character, you know,
Mhm.
as a person, and then you rewrite that value, or maybe you just reinforce it, right? Maybe
Mhm.
you they double down on it, and so the idea being then is like over the course of a campaign, your character may not change a lot mechanically in terms of their skill set or their the raw numbers, right?
Yeah.
But in terms of their values and their focuses and just like what's important to them, that'll change, and that I think reflects Star Trek very well. But to a
Mhm.
certain degree, it kind of reflects life too, right? Because we
Well.
we don't we don't not change, right? We're always changing.
Yeah.
Every time we encounter a situation or have an experience, something's
Mhm.
going to change to some extent. So
Yeah.
that's the system basically is, you have opportunities to challenge those values or to reinforce those values, and it has a mechanical impact on the game, and then you carry it on from there.
That sounds awesome. Well, there's some fans in the comment. There's a little chat going on saying how they like it. So it seems like it's doing what it's meant to, which is great.
Yeah, cool.
Speaking of questions, we've had some fantastic questions today. So thank you so much. We are coming up near to the top of the hour. So if you have any more questions, now is the time to ask them whilst we're still on the air. I'm going to move us on from talking about Star Trek Adventures, unless there's something we've missed that we were meant to talk about that you just had to tell us about. But I think we've covered a lot of things, Jim.
Yeah, I'm just sorry
Yeah.
that we're not going to be able to get to all the questions. I see the chat window flying back and forth with a lot of stuff, so apologies in advance if we don't get to all the questions. But I'm super present on social media for the game, so
Oh yeah.
if you don't have a chance to get my question or you don't have a chance to get your question answered, just reach out to me. Happy to chat with you anytime. Yeah, Twitter, the Modifius Discord, the forums, email, like whatever. I'm happy to chat about the game all the time. I think if there was one last thing I'd say about the game, it's
Mhm.
that I think we did touch on this actually, Jess, and I apologize if I'm repeating myself, but like if you're new to the game
Yeah.
and you're only a little bit familiar with Star Trek,
Mhm.
don't let the fact that there's 55 years of Star Trek staring you in the face. Just find a couple episodes that you like, and like there's tons of top 10 lists on the internet for like best Star Trek episodes to watch. We even have a couple of lists in the some of the newer products like the Player's Guide and the Game Master Guide and the Discovery book that just came out. Like there's a list of episodes that you can watch if you want to get a feel for the franchise.
Mhm.
And then again, just pick the episodes you like, pick the era of play you like, come to an agreement with your group on a good session zero, and then just have fun. Don't let all the noise scare you. And like
Yeah.
the fan base is great, and you just have to kind of like put your filter on and just figure out what Star Trek means to you, and then just have fun. I
Mhm.
think this is a really fun game. I have so much fun playing it. I mean, even if I wasn't the project manager, I'd have fun playing it.
Yeah.
And I am, for lack of a better word, I'm chuffed every time I go onto Twitch or YouTube or whatever, and I see people playing this game. Like it's just amazing to me. Like I can watch somebody. There's a group in Germany who was playing it recently, and I was watching their
Yeah.
Twitch channel late at night. It's like I don't speak German, I can't understand it, but I could tell that they were having
Yeah.
a great time. And it's just amazing for me to remember that, like, oh yeah, this game is played all around the world, and
Yeah.
and people are getting something out of it. So just have fun, enjoy it, and again, any questions, reach out to me or any of the fans. The fans are great for this game.
Yeah, we have had a question come up since then, which is, can
Sure.
we have you back on the show again, Jim?
I would be I would
So
be flattered.
that's the
Yeah,
question. So it
absolutely.
seems they do it. Well, it sounds like you've got 2 more years of stuff coming up, so I'm sure there'll be new things to talk about. So
At least,
absolutely,
yeah.
we'll definitely have to do that.
Cross fingers more than 2 years, but we'll see.
Well, yeah, I said at least 2 years. You
At
said
least 2
planned
years.
out. So
Yeah.
at the
Yeah.
very least. So I'm sure we can have you back on again to talk about more Star Trek things.
Yay, that's exciting.
Speaking of that, so we talked a lot about Star Trek, which we obviously love, but another section of the show, I like us to talk about our favorite RPGs or things that we're playing that are not D&D and that are not about the thing we've been talking about today. So do you have anything, Jim? Anything you're playing that's not Star Trek Adventures, or is it all just Star Trek Adventures now?
Yeah, it's interesting that like most of my free time, outside of my day job and outside of my family, is working on this game because I'm so passionate about it. But I do try to find time to play other games. I don't currently have an RPG in my wheelhouse right now, partly because my group is in a bit of a hiatus at the moment, and we're kind of in that weird, like a lot of groups get into that weird vibe where like there's just so many games to play right now that we don't know what we want to play. But I've been reading up on Pendragon because I really got the Jones to play Pendragon again. I've got the One Ring. You showed the book a few minutes ago. I've got the One Ring. I got the Kickstarter actually, and here's the sad thing, right? I'm so busy with Star Trek that I haven't even opened the box yet for the Kickstarter. Like I know I've got it from my post office. Yeah, I've got the starter set, and I got the red cover. Yeah, I got the red cover book and whatever else is in the Kickstarter. But I've got the box sitting down over here, and I just haven't had a chance to even open it yet. So I'll crack into that pretty soon.
Great.
And then I just pre-ordered the new Marvel RPG that's coming out pretty soon that Matt Forbeck wrote, and I can't wait to check that out because like I was a huge fan of the Marvel superheroes game that came out with TSR way back in the day. My group and I just ate that one up. We love playing that game, and I haven't personally found another superheroes game that I liked as well as that one.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to see if this new Marvel game compares to it, or is at least a good game experience, right? But other than that, I've been playing some video games, some Lego games. I got the new Lego Star Wars game that fills some of my odd time, and then the Marvel Champions card game, the one that Fantasy Flight does. That's just a great game. So I'm keeping the game engine in my head filled. But like as far as RPGs right now, I've been in a Star Trek bubble for a while. And
what a lovely place to be. Nothing wrong with that.
I can't really complain. It's kind of a dream.
Yeah, it's funny though, Jim, that you mentioned the One Ring because next week's guest is Francesco to talk about the One Ring. So if you're watching and you want to get into this and learn all about it, that'll be next Monday at 10 p.m. BST. You can come on and have a look at that. Also from us at EN Live. So on 8 p.m. this Thursday, we're doing EN Publishing's monthly live stream, and we're going to be chatting to the cast of the first Level Up Advanced 5th Edition campaign, which launches on Tuesday the 26th next week. We won't talk about that here though, because that is D&D and this is not D&D. You can get a summary of all the schedule and shows we do at EN Live at enliverpg.com, so you can check that out there. And as we mentioned at the top, all these shows are brought to you by EN Live, which is part of EN World, the leading tabletop news and review site. It seems like no more questions. As Jim's mentioned, you can reach out online to ask any questions. It sounds like we'll have to have you back again, Jim. Thank you so much for coming on and talking to us and sharing Star Trek Adventures with us all.
Hey, Jess, thank you so much for having me aboard. I really appreciate it. Had a lot of fun. And yeah, absolutely. Other folks will tell you that I will not stop talking about Star Trek Adventures. I could go on and on about it, but yeah, absolutely happy to come on. But even if that doesn't work out, it was a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to expose more folks to the game, and I hope everybody has fun. I think you're going to be in for a treat next week because Francesco is an awesome person to talk with.
Yeah.
So I think I'm going to have to tune in for that one because that's going to be fun.
Please do. You know where we are.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you so much for having me aboard.
You're more welcome. Thanks so much. And thank you for everyone that watched so much. And we hope to see you next week. Thanks very much.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Live long and prosper. Be safe. Be well.